Hi, my name is Kenny Fuentes.
I'm Steve Orr.
My name is Erik-Peter Mortensen.
Hi, my name is Marieuse, and this is 60 Minutes. Cut. That's the wrong program. Guys, cut that, please.
You are watching the Music Roundtable with Kenny Fuentes, Steve Orr, Erik-Peter Mortensen, and Marieuse Shamir.
Well, so, by now you figured out that we are not, in fact, indeed 60 Minutes. We are the Music Roundtable. And we're all happy to be here with you today. Obviously, I'm not wearing the same shirt. This is our first time, so we make mistakes, and we have to go back and fix it. But we're going to be talking primarily about, does music have an effect on social change? And we're also going to get into other topics, I'm sure, along the way, and maybe we can entertain you. So without further ado, here we go.
Does music impact social change?
Excellent.
So opinions? Let's go around. Okay, why don't we just
I have
open it up
Mary.
and let's go. Anyone want to start on that topic?
Well, I think, when you think about, does protest music, does music affect social change? You look at, hip hop, and you look at, specifically rap, as it started in the early 80s. And that was it really started as a way of a lot of black men, African-American men, who felt completely disenfranchised and completely, disconnected from the mainstream. It was their way of saying, I too am a man. I too am human. And so is my wife, and so are my children, and all of that. We matter. And so, if the question is going to be, if it does affect social change, I would say that absolutely. Or at the very least, the soundtrack to what was before Black Lives Matter today, right? The civil rights movement, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. A lot of the protest music, a lot of it was hip hop, a lot of it was rap, a lot of it was, social change and empowerment, protest as empowerment. I too am a man. And so when you look at, if we're going to talk about social change, I think one conversation we could be having is about the civil rights movement, like what songs were popular, or became the soundtrack to like Martin Luther King Jr. and his speech and things like that in the 60s. And we know the 60s is rife with music.
I think what you said is very valid, and I think that was actually that is the general purpose of the hip hop movement and how it's evolving, and it's been evolving for decades since that point. The question is, is there a song called "Rage Against the Machine"? Does anyone have heard of that song?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
It's a group.
So, are we actually raging against the machine, but nothing's affecting the machine? So, in other words, we have protest music now, and it still seems that people in the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, are saying it hasn't done much. It may seem to do much, but it's like playing three-card Monte and shifting the marble of one problem into another cup, and it really hasn't done much. Does anyone get that vibration?
I think that. I agree with that. And also it seems like in the 60s, songs were more effective for social change, the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights era. I don't know about gay rights, but all that. And like now, and with Rage Against the Machines, it's more of a marketing tool. Hip hop is actually transmuted into more of a marketing tool. Then I don't believe it can change. I think we're stuck with the 1% and the 99%. I think it makes us feel good to sing it. We shall overcome. But these days, I have very little faith that music has any influence on the way society goes. It's all about money.
It does seem to be more monetized. What do you think, Marieuse?
I think there's definitely a monetization focus to everything that we do now. I mean, not just music. But with that being said, I also think that there was a time when music did have an effect on people to affect social change. I mean, one of the very first songs that I remember, and this is from literally when I was a kid, 4 or 5 years old, was "Woman is the Nigger of the World." And I remember thinking about, first of all, I didn't really know what that meant. But as I grew older, I always kept that phrase in my mind. And it occurred to me that as I grew older, that it was true, that women really are the lowest of the low. You know, if you're a black woman or if you're the lowest of the low. It doesn't matter what kind of race you are, you're always going to be the lowest. Hey everyone, you just saw me make a comment in the last clip. What I didn't mean to say that women are the lowest of the low. What I meant to say was that, as John Lennon put it, that women are the slave to the slave, and I'm going to let him, in his words, say this.
Well, at the time, I was more of a chauvinist than I am now, and I must say I was saying, well, come on, what about this and what about that? And I argued a lot. And then, as like everybody else, we talked more and more about it. In the last 2 years, it became more of a thing, and I had to, you know, find out about myself and my attitude to women. And this phrase of hers kept coming through my head, woman is the nigger of the world, woman is the nigger. So I said, come on, Yoko, look, this is it. You've said it here. I agree with you now. I think she is. She's the slave of the slaves. That's what Connolly said, the great Irishman. And so we sat down together and we wrote, we tried to write together the whole story as best we could in a 3 or 4 minute song. And it's called Woman is the Nigger of the World. And then luckily for me, because a lot of stations were saying, well, we're not going to play this because it says nigger and a white man shouldn't say it, though all my black friends feel I have quite a right to say it because they understand it. And then, strangely enough, the chairman of the Black Caucus, that great guy, Congressman Ron Dellums, Democrat California, says here, he came out with this, which is fantastic. If you define niggers as someone whose lifestyle is defined by others, whose opportunities are defined by others, whose role in society is defined by others, then good news. You don't have to be black to be a nigger in this society. Most of the people in America are niggers. I didn't say that. Oh, my goodness. We'll never get in now. I think the word nigger has changed. It does not have the same meaning as it used to, and I think he put it very succinctly there, and I really believe women have the worst. Whatever it is, however badly or poor people are, it's the woman that takes it when they get home from work.
And to me, that affected me, and I think it affects other people. But to Steve's comment, in the current environment, I think what's been lost over the years is the ability to show some genuine anger through music and to be able to express what's really ailing people. And I think rap has kind of took the baton, but I think that music needs to get back to that. I think that people have to genuinely express themselves.
And I think that if I'll dovetail on that, I think that if we look at a survey of music in the past, the 50s was very crooning and very, Skeeter Davis, the end of the world. But it wasn't really, it wasn't getting to the nitty gritty. It wasn't really anger. It wasn't reactive music. It was just very kind of passive in the background. It was very beautiful music. But when you saw the way the music erupted in the 60s, right, with, the flower movement and the flower kid movement and the hippies and all of that, and that all, it seemed like so much to the bands. And if we look at a monumental event in music that is Woodstock, so much of those bands were creating, yes, popular music, but a lot of them were making protest music. And a lot of them were, I'm sorry?
But even before Woodstock came around, the big initiator, I want to say, was Vietnam. Not just even in the United States. I mean, even,
tearing society apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that in England and in other countries, the whole issue of war, I think that's what really, entered into the psyche. There were a whole bunch of wars at the time. There was the Vietnam War. There was Israel and in the Middle East, the 6-Day War. There was the invasion of Czechoslovakia. There were all these different things that were related to violence, I think particularly. That's what the common theme was. And so I think that when Woodstock came around, Woodstock was actually an expression of that 2 years or 3 years of all this violence occurring and a reaction and people saying, enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I think about all we are saying is give peace a chance. What, Lennon?
Yep.
Right?
Lennon and Yoko Ono.
And then I also remember Sergeant James Calley, the Vietnam War song that had the drums, the snare drums, and it was a very almost patriotic call to arms about we're in this war and we have to support it. And so these little things were coming out in music, you know, to express, and they made the charts. And then what? Like into the 80s and Reaganomics? And
Well,
like,
yeah, and preceding the 80s, if I may, there was, you know, even in like the 70s, yes, you hear Carly Simon, you hear Elton John, which was never really protest music, but you know, the CBGBs in the 70s and in Manhattan, and also like the late 60s, early 70s, where you had people like Patti Smith, who recorded songs like "People Have the Power," and a lot of her music was very, it's just, you know, it was an expression of punk meets poetry meets rock and roll. And that was something that was very new for that age. And so, you know, there was 60s, 70s, and then, like you just mentioned, Steve, of Reaganomics.
Well, I'm going to actually...
sorry.
I'm going to bring up a point that Marieuse and I were talking about earlier, and also link it to a point that Steve and I were talking earlier today. Marieuse actually said that one of the original form of protest music was rock and roll, and that Elvis was innovating. And
with his hips moving.
It was sex. It was sex.
Walking through a party in the county jail. The prison band was there and they began to wail. The band was jumping and the drum began to swing. You should have heard this knocked out jailbird sing. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
Lots of people tried to ban him.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Censored. And then we got into how now, why is so-called rock dead? That's one of these phrases that we hear. Well, one thing that Marieuse is pointing out is that, well, because hip-hop music became the new protest music, and people are sort of compelled by new forms of protest music. When one form of protest music stagnates, another form of protest music emerges.
I remember what I told you. It was specifically rap. And the reason that rap doesn't resonate with everybody is because a lot of people, you know, maybe the brown and black might, you know, or Latino, or, you know, in other words, white people, there's a group of people that do resonate with rap.
Oh, yeah.
But there's, on the other hand, there's also a group of people that are like white nationalists and white social, you know, that see rap and say, oh, fuck, these guys are, you know, coming to get us.
Or older white people, you know, which just, you know, it's like hard on the ears.
Right.
Yeah.
My special,
and it is hard on the ears.
Right.
It is hard to listen to.
Talking about hard on the ears, my specialty is actually in classical music, right?
Yes.
So talking about hard on the ears, for centuries until early 1900s, there was an acknowledged belief that something that's beautiful and easy to listen to is the ideal form of music.
Yeah.
And actually, when we got to things like Arnold Schoenberg, and it also reflected in the art world, like Pablo Picasso. Yeah. They wanted to shock and awe. That was their campaign. Shock and awe. Disruptive music. People were actually rioted at Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which is part of the Fantasia music we all know, with the dinosaurs dying. That's from Stravinsky's Rite of Spring.
Right.
He would change time signatures, rhythms, create very big clashes in the orchestra. And that was like a musical revolution. It was not a social revolution, but it kind of was, because it totally reoriented the 20th century. At the time, it was protest music because there was World War I going on. Guernica in Spain was going on. And this really dissonant, had never been heard before, the dissonant type of agitated music. So that was kind of an original form of protest music. However, years later, now in 20th century classical music circles, there's this idea of why bother? What the fuck, why? Why do we have to make ugly sounding dissonant music? And there's a movement to go back to creating beautiful music, even in a classical music context. So I'm wondering, is there going to be that same kind of reaction eventually to really aggressive, hard on the ears? Is there going to be a going back to harmonious, what do human beings like to naturally hear?
Well,
So that's-
piggybacking on that, though, I think we're talking about two different, the classical world versus the pop world, and I think they are very, very different. There are some things that fuse,
Yeah,
but I think you're talking about two different mediums.
I am, but I'm also talking about how, we had, even though we had protest music in the 60s, right? If you listen to protest music in the 60s, they are still amazing pieces of musical craft. There's a lot of melodic stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff. Somehow,
Yeah.
we have gotten to the point where we put a beat together, slap some words on it, and call it like a Picasso or like a modern artwork, where you take 3 pigment colors, you throw it on there, and you say this is now the new standard. Is that what's happening? I mean, is that what?
Can I speak to
some
a point?
Yeah.
Marvin Gaye made one of the most famous protest songs, and it was actually a very melodic, soft kind of song. Father, Father.
Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh.
That's
Yeah,
the name
yeah.
of the song, What's Going On. And so, I mean, just, I think to your point, I mean, yes, there are things that could be beautiful and could be, just something that people can connect to. But the thing that was very prominent in his song, What's Going On, was exactly that phrase. It's like, what's happening? What the fuck is going on? And so even though even though the music might be kind of, melodic and easier on the ear, he was still saying something that was just very, very sharp. It just hit somewhere. And I think that, if we're talking about music today, that's the missing element, is that people are not talking about the things that people in Black Lives Matter are talking about, which is unfortunate.
It's almost as if the music business has like this weird form of like monetization rape going on in the culture that there, I mean, country music, for example, selling it, nothing can be, Kenny and I have talked about this in our songwriter, Nashville songwriter, there's a formula, you do not deviate in, and if you do deviate from it, the red lights go on.
Yeah.
I mean, how can an artist express within this context?
We were
In popular music, it's almost an impossibility.
We were talking about that actually with Marieuse and other people. We were saying that, I was doing a hip-hop track, and I threw a few things in there that are not traditionally hip-hop, but it was a great piece of work. Now, we actually are going, and I was talking to Steve about this too, maybe even Kenny. I read somewhere, and I can't put my finger on where I read this. It might even be on YouTube. You might be able to see it on YouTube, and there's an expose that over in the early 60s, the music industry would actually take a gamble on 1,000 different artists. And the 2 or 3 artists that succeeded made more than enough money for all the 99% that failed. But
Ray Charles.
they took chances on every kind of style, every kind of music. Now, with the advent of databases and trends and statistics and analysis, they know what kind of music is top charting. They know what the formula is for success.
And everyone's after that formula.
And whatever you are, if they see you and you're not doing that, they'll either discard you or they will make you into that formula for success.
Exactly.
That's the first. And what we also see is in the 60s, you had 1,000 different varieties of styles. Now we have 5 to 6 different varieties of styles. And if you deviate between those compartments, you're going to be called an independent artist or an experimental artist.
But that's if you're going through a studio. I mean, one of the advantages of today's format, so to speak, is that you can make music at home, just like you do.
Right.
And you can publish your music at home, just like you do. And you can market it from your home, just like you do. And so I think that there are artists that take advantage of that to do their own thing. And so the real question is, is that there are some people that play it safe, and there's some people that aren't using that, because I think there's a lot of issues out there that people would love to hear musically, and they just don't get it from artists because artists are playing it safe.
Yeah, that's the one thing too. But as I was saying, in the 60s, if you actually do an analysis of the actual music, there was more melodic variation, more chord structure variation, more rhythmic variation, more timbre variation. That is the kind of instruments that you would use in a song. It could be actually timpani or harpsichord in one song, and another song might have tuba and trombone. Now, if you're in a certain genre, you stick to a certain safe set of elements, right? The number of notes you're supposed to sing has been reduced from this range to this range.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. So it's because artists are playing it safe, and they want to, even though we are independent artists and can do things ourselves, there's still the mentality of, I want my song to be a hit so that a big record label can come pick it up, right? So
Well,
even though, you know...
I don't think it's necessarily that a big label will come and pick you up. I think the motivation these days is that it'll get more play online when they go on YouTube, or they go, you know...
Exactly. And actually that brings me to another point of interest. All that money that the music industry saved, I'm not going to take a chance on Steve. I'm not going to take a chance on Kenny. I liked Taylor Swift. We're going to market the out of her, or it could be any other artist. It doesn't have to be Taylor Swift. It could be Justin Bieber, whatever. We are going to make sure that we put that on every radio campaign, every commercial we can, and over time, by shouting, by telling you this is what you ought to be hearing, this is what's available, this is what the top stars are doing, people are sort of conditioned to get used to that particular lane, and when they hear something that deviates, they say, that's weird. People like to hear things that are familiar. So if you take another artist and mold her like a pop artist or like a hip-hop artist, it sounds familiar and very warm to fans of that genre. But there's a certain amount, I think, of public manipulation that these are the kinds of music that are great, and these are the kinds of music that are not so great.
It's market manipulation, certain amount. The entire music, every market is manipulated.
And in a way, now that you mention it, I'm kind of a protester. I'll admit that. I don't want to be, even though I know I ought to brand myself in a particular way, I still like to put my finger in 10 different genres and see what I can create out of that. And I want to have as diversity a palette as possible. It's very difficult to do that in this world, but that's still one of my dreams, you know?
Well, let me ask you this much. You know, let me bring up this point. We know that there's all these, you know, algorithms and all this monetization. What if any of it is protest music today? Because we have Black Lives Matter, we have pandemic, we have pro-Trump, anti-Trump, we have all the ingredients that would cause artists from all different genres.
He's frozen.
Oh shit!
Is he frozen?
Please don't tell me this. What happened?
And we were having a very good roundtable so far.
We can hear you, but your head is frozen.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this video, hell is frozen over, and Kenny's in it.
Oh no! Here he comes.
Oh no! Here it comes.
Oh,
Doing
can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, but your head is frozen.
Oh,
Your
my
image is
God.
frozen.
Oh, this is crazy.
It's like you're talking from Mars.
Yeah, I see my frozen. I see it. All I see is my big nose. All right, so anyway, I'm gonna try to.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh!
This is what they call outtakes.
Right.
The
This
outtakes.
is so embarrassing. And no, this is better than my balcony
There.
because my balcony, the signal's always shot.
It just moved.
It moved like like a glacier moving over 1,000 years. It moved an inch.
Right.
I think he should just stay doing the audio. We put the picture of Kenny up. Just the photo.
I love that picture, I must say, yeah.
Now we know that if we fail, our last gesture will be permanently recorded into the annals of time.
You.
Oh! Yeah, exactly.
Hey everyone, thank you for watching our video. There you are. And we're going to talk a little bit more. We have a second session which we recorded that was continuing the discussion about whether music has an impact on social change. And there's some other topics that we touched on. We talked about information overload, how we're always having different pieces of information that are thrown at us from all different directions now, and how people kind of, at this point, we tune them out, and we try to frame that in the course with music. We also talk about some other stuff like the homogenization of music, where, again, where we're talking about how music is always kind of within a certain range melodically. And then we also talk about whether music is escapism, and whether that's, something that that we're all kind of, we're escaping from COVID, we're escaping from racism, we're escaping from all sorts of different things that, we wish we didn't have to deal with, but we do. And the last thing that I want to say, we're looking at music as a form of connection. I think that's why, people become artists, and that's why people actually record the things that they do, is because as artists, they have kind of like a thing, something missing, whether it's love or, even with fans, it's like there's a need for connection. And I think we all have that, regardless of whether you're a musician or not. So we're going to talk about that. And I hope that you'll join us for the next video. Thank you so much for joining us.